Hi. Today I am going to talk about the foundations of the Nazi police state. Not the actual police state, because that's like a whole another deal, but the foundations of what constituted the Nazi police state and resistance against it. Now, you may be thinking, why did I call this video The Age of Himmler? Well, again, I'm only setting out the foundations, but one thing you need to know about this is Himmler. If there was a man who was second in terms of power, second only to Hitler, it would be Himmler, especially during the 1930s. 1940s, military power occurring. The 1930s, that's Himmler. Himmler, like I'm going to tell you, he controlled so much what was going on in Germany. It was crazy. And it's just, everything he did, everything you see in movies about Nazis, and the SA, the SS, the Gestapo, it's all Himmler. So I just want to call this like the Age of Himmler, the Himmler Golden Age, because it's basically his time to shine. It's his moment of glory. Yes, there were terrible things, but it was his best moments in life. He peaked in the 1930s. And that's why I'm calling it the Age of Himmler, because, like I'm going to explain to you in a while, yeah, I mean, all the structures and all the institutions, yeah, but also all the resistance, spoiler alert, none of it actually succeeded in overthrowing the Nazis, thanks to Himmler. So Himmler is just the golden boy of this period. So let's start. Well, the police state was constituted by several institutions or groups, like the SS, the SD, the Gestapo, the courts, and the Nazi concentration camps. Well, first I'm going to tell you what the SS, the SD, and the Gestapo are, and then I'm going to explain the differences, because I used to get them mixed up. Now I know what they are, so you may get it mixed up too, so don't worry, I'm going to take care of that. Well, the SS, who was the commander? Himmler. Well, the SS's purpose was to be basically Hitler's personal guard. He used brutality and just plain violence. They were really systematic, and their main purpose was to inflict terror. There were two types of SS. It was the normal SS in Germany and the Waffen SS, which are the ones in occupied territories. The Waffen ones are like the Waffen SS are the most famous ones, the most brutal ones, the ones portrayed in movies. That's the Waffen SS. And they controlled concentration camps. Well, the members were completely Aryan. To join the SS, you needed to fill out a form and basically prove that you were Aryan. You had to be tall, blonde, blue eyes, strong, very much like our dear Hitler, who was average height, bald, kind of, not bald, but not that much hair, and wore glasses, because he's the example of what an Aryan man should be. They were completely dehumanized. They were disciplined and racially pure. They were beaten up to basically just follow orders. They were not human. They were human. They weren't sentient beings. If you've seen Star Wars, the clones, they are based on the SS, not the SA. The SA, I don't think I've mentioned this in the video, but the SA, they get less important after 1934, and they just lose importance, and the SS take over. That's not saying the SA disappeared. The SA were still really important during this period, but it was the SS who caused the police state. And they were really aggressive, brutal, did whatever. Then the SD. The leader was Reinhard Heydrich. Heydrich, he was actually a member, the SD under Heydrich, actually a subdivision of the SS. So yeah, the SD's boss was Heydrich, but Heydrich reported to Himmler. Himmler hired Heydrich. So really, the head of the SD was, in fact, if you think about it, Himmler. Well, they were the secret police, the Nazi secret police. They gathered information and also internal party surveillance. They were independent from the Gestapo. I'm gonna go talk more about that in a bit. And they gathered public, as well as information in internal security, they gathered public opinion and information. They were amateurs, were kind of trained, but not really. They were committed to Nazi Party, and they were analytical and evaluated the data. So, fun fact, if you've ever watched a movie, in movies, the SD isn't represented that much. It's mostly the Gestapo and the SS. The SA kinda, the SD, I've not seen a movie that I remember with the SD. But if you ever watch a movie and think, oh, come on, the SD and the Gestapo could not have been that sketchy. It's obviously exaggerated for film value. Well, and not really. Sorry about that, that's my dog. Well, not really, no. Heydrich, when he was being interviewed by Himmler for the SD, said, hey, I have all these ideas on how this internal party security could function. Where did you get these ideas? Well, Heydrich was he was a strong fan of spy movies and action movies. So all these ideas he presented to Himmler were actually based on movies. So yeah, if you see a movie with the SD or the Gestapo in the movies, they're kind of based on the Gestapo, obviously, but the way they function kind of based on the SD. Anyway, so in the movies, when you see the SD and the Gestapo acting so sketchy, so everywhere, that's kind of what Heydrich had in mind. So they're actually not far off. For once, Hollywood has it right. And then the Gestapo. At the beginning, the head was Göring, but at one point, Himmler took over. So now he has the SS, the SD, and the Gestapo. Well, they were apparently omnipresent and omnipotent, so they knew everything and were everywhere. But in reality, by 1939, there were only 20,000 members. They were the professional secret service. They did not work for the Nazis. They tracked opponents and minorities. They gained intelligence, and they were run by the state, not the Nazi Party. They used torture and persuasive tactics, so basically beating people up, and they basically did their own thing. Now, I'm now going to explain to you the difference between the SS, the SD, and the Gestapo. The SA is really easy to differentiate, because they're just like the Nazi army. The SS and the Gestapo, the SS is basically like Hitler's personal guard, the black shirts. So if you gave the SA power up and they would just turn to like black shirts marching, yeah, that were like the secret police, not secret police, secret service, but more brutal, more army-like. Okay, the SD was technically part of the SS, but at the same time kind of separate. The SD and the Gestapo is where it gets confusing. The SD they are all amateurs. The Gestapo, the professionals. The SD work for the Nazis, for the Nazi Party. The Gestapo work for the state. Now, you may think, isn't that the same thing? Not really. Whenever I try to explain this to someone, they always get confused, but I don't know how to. I'm going to try to explain to you. If you get it, great. If you don't, I am sorry. I can maybe try to explain it better by writing, but you can comment if you want me to explain it to you again. Anyway, so the SD technically work for the Nazi Party. So they do gather public opinion, but they mostly work on internal matters and people inside the party, and opinion on the Nazi Party. So opinion on how the party was structured, how the ideas they put forward, individual party members. They just criticized the SD only monitored criticisms towards the party. The Gestapo, however, criticized. They got information on criticisms towards the regime, so concentration camps. The Jews kind of how things were being run in the country. So more state matters rather than Nazi matters. So how to put this into perspective? So I'm thinking, okay, maybe the SD would monitor more things Boris Johnson did, but the Gestapo, this is like just to put you into perspective, I'm not comparing anything to anything. The Gestapo would be more controlling on how people saw England and public opinions on England and Brexit, if that makes any sense. The Gestapo also took care of Jews and asocials and gypsies, and yeah, they were the ones who. I'm not saying that they controlled the concentration camps. They controlled the opinion towards the concentration camps. So summary: SD controlled. They were confirmation on the Nazi Party, loyal to the Nazi Party. The Gestapo were loyal to the state. I don't know if that makes any sense, but if it doesn't, please let me know and I'll explain to you in the comments. And the courts. The courts were run by NASDAQ. Obviously, the Nazi Party. They upheld Nazi ideals, they made sure the laws were being followed, and they convicted political opponents. Now, to get to those courts, as a defendant, you need to get arrested. And who arrested you? The SD Gestapo. And who ran those associations? Himmler. It's all Himmler. The judge's career depended on the Nazi Party, so all the judges were Nazis. There was no jury, and defendants had no rights to appeal against the sentence. So they were sentenced to 20 years in prison. They were sentenced to 20 years in prison, and they would serve 20 years in prison. If they were sentenced to death, they were sentenced to death. And who would take charge of those penalties? That's right, the SS and the SD and the Gestapo. So it's all Himmler. And then finally, the concentration camps. Mind you, again run by the SS or run by Himmler. But do not mistake concentration camps in the 1930s with concentration camps in the late 1930s, 1940s. At this point, they were just mainly for political opponents and work camps. Not concentration camps for the Jews or death camps. No. They were basically prisons, but you worked. So that's the police state. Again, literally all run by Himmler. This is Himmler. So, if anyone ever asks you about the police state, oh, what do you know about the police state? You say Himmler. And whatever you can remember about Himmler, it's Himmler. Fun fact, when I was younger and I just learned who Hitler and Himmler were, I used to confuse them because not because they were similar, no, just because the names. But I knew who Hitler was and I knew who Himmler was, I just mixed the names up. And then I obviously know who Hitler and Himmler are now, but I'm talking year 4, year 5, year 6. Anyway, so there was obviously resistance against this police state, right? People wouldn't just go along. Well, there were 3 types of resistance: and nonconformity, resistance, and protest. So, what do we mean by nonconformity? Well, telling anti-Hitler jokes, not showing public devotion to Hitler or the Nazi Party, not attending any of the rallies. If you're a teacher, refusing to teach the curriculum, although that did not work. Not denouncing things that would go against the regime. So if you knew your next door neighbor was a communist who hated Hitler and constantly listened to British radio and was a Jew, if you did not report them to the Gestapo, nothing would happen. Okay, so that's nonconformity. You weren't sending people to Nazi regime. So if you were a priest, your church summons anti-Nazi, not putting up your Hitler portrait at home. And what many people did was they kept it. So imagine this is a Hitler portrait, and they kept it on the wall, right? During a visit. So when they left, you put it down. Then right next to it. So then, say an SS member goes to the door and goes for an inspection, you can just place it back up. It takes 1 second and nothing happens. So you don't have your Hitler portrait there. That's non-conformity. Not if you're a Hitler Youth member, not attending the Hitler Youth, it becomes obligatory later on. But when it isn't, not attending the Hitler Youth. If you're at school, you do not do any homework on eugenics or Nazi ideals. If you're in a business or want to buy something, buy from a Jewish shop, that's non-conformity again. Being openly homosexual, although I don't know how that would work out for you, and leaving the country. Those are all forms of non-conformity, because it just shows how you're not conforming with the Nazi regime. Then the actual resistance. You could just go straight in and plan a coup to overthrow Hitler. There are quite a few, at least 2 that I know of. The most famous one is on Operation Valkyrie, July 20th, 1944. Fun fact, I remember the date because my birthday is on July 20th, so that's that. Also, instead of attacking Hitler, attacking other high-ranking Nazi members, which I don't think there were any major attacks against people like Himmler or Goering, but I don't know. I mean, if you were planning on resisting, you could attack high-ranking Nazi members. Straight up printing out opposition propaganda, underground newspapers, if you're in the SPD or the so-paid, I'm going to explain that in a sec. Meeting, plotting with Germany's enemies, so meeting Britain. And if you've watched my video on Hesse's infamous flight to Scotland, that is kind of resistance to the Nazi regime if you think about it. Graffiti, if you're in a Nazi rally, disturbing it, just shouting stuff. Terrorist attacks against terrorist only defines it what goes against the state then. So 100 years ago, being openly homosexual, that's an act of terrorism. Of course, you planned a bomb in the Hitler rally. That is terrorism. Right now, we would say, oh, that's a good thing. But back then, in Nazi Germany, it's an act of terrorism. If you work in a factory, you could break machinery, you could just block the roads, or you could smuggle in foreign radios, which did happen quite a bit. That's just plain resistance. That's just completely going the opposite, like out of your way to disrupt the Nazi regime. Then protest, like striking in your workplace, not going to conscription. Again, propaganda in plebiscites, voting no. Although again, I don't know how that would turn out for you. Not following Nazi legislation, especially judges. Setting up trade unions, although these were later banned in May 1933. And not paying taxes. Although again, I don't know how that would work out for you. But those are the types of resistance. And now I'm going to get into all the actual resistance. There are quite a few. Because when we're taught the Nazi regime, we just see how people just went along with it. There were obviously types of resistance against the Nazi regime. So, yeah, there were, it's just none of them were actually successful. But so before I start, I'm just going to point out how I'm going to mention the Protestant Church and the Catholic Church here. I'm going to make a video sooner or later on the Protestant and Catholic Church in Nazi Germany. So just, if you want to hear more on those, just you wait. Anyway, so first, the first group that really resisted the Nazis were the SPD and the so-paid. The so-paid are the SPD in exile. So the way they resisted was voting against the Enabling Act. So I don't I don't think I've made a video on this. I probably will at some point. But the Enabling Act was passed on 23rd of March 1933 with 444 votes against 94. And it was basically giving up political liberties and freedoms. But those 94 votes were by the SPD. And there were not as many votes as there were supposedly seats in the Reichstag. And this is because on the 8th of March of that same year, the KPD was banned. But I am not going to get into it. Anyway, so that's another topic. Also, they didn't go to work. They called for strikes. They did newspapers. And they were quite popular. Their members were 300,000, obviously left-wing, and mainly made by previous SPD members. I don't think many joined the SPD and the so-paid during the regime. It was mostly people who were previously in the regime who would go on to resist the Nazis. Why did they oppose the Nazis? Well, again, completely different political ideologies. Okay, so the political spectrum. And don't question me on this, I am probably going to do a video, but the Nazi Party is far right. Don't even try to say it's left wing. No, it's far right. Especially by this point. So if you want me to do a video on the Nazi regime, political spectrum, let me know. But I will eventually at some point. If you want it now, just comment below, I guess. But here, this should be your right. So, and my right. Anyway, here is the Nazi Party, extreme right. Yes. And then here is the KPD, extreme left. Here, right here, just before the middle, moderate left, a bit to the extreme, but not really, is the SPD. So they were completely different political ideologies. Quite different. So that's one of the reasons they opposed the Nazis. Also, they were banned. I don't remember the date when they were actually banned, and that would not have sat well. But they were not effective. They never came out of exile. Over 140 workers in the strikes organized by the so-called SPD were arrested. So again, not really. They were banned. Not really strong presence in German politics and resistance movements. Oh, they did report on them. That's the SD and so-called. Then KPD, again, extreme left. So the way they resisted using newspapers and person to person, because especially left-wing propaganda was really squashed down by the propaganda ministry. So if you want to pass on left-wing extreme propaganda, you had to go from mouth to mouth. The members, obviously communists, extreme left-wings, and quite popular in both Munich and Berlin. They were basically everywhere, especially in the bigger cities. Why were the KPD against the Nazi regime? Apart from extreme political ideologies, because they were banned on the 8th of March. So, and also in the Reichstag fire they were accused. I have not done a video on the Reichstag fire yet, so keep a lookout for that. And yeah, the reason they weren't that successful is because, like I said, there was a lot of suppression of leftist propaganda and newspapers, so they did not have that much communication. And by 1936, there were not that many groups. So, yeah. 1936, there were not many groups, therefore, not that successful. Then, the workers. My very first video on this channel was Nazi policies towards the workers, so if you want to watch that, you can. But yeah, there were some great policies, but not all of them liked them. So, how did they resist? Strikes. Here I have the number 25,000. I am guessing that was the number of people at one of the strikes. Out of those 25,000, 4,000 were imprisoned. Again, using methods of absenteeism, so not appearing, straight up not going to work, or sabotage. So, breaking machinery. Oh no, I forgot to do that, I'm sorry. That. Members were the working class, workers, and trade unions. If you remember, the trade unions were banned under the law for the restoration of the professional civil service in April 1933, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure. I have to double check. But yeah, they were banned. And the DAF was set up. Again, if you want to hear more about the DAF and the SDF and the SDA and the KDF, go watch my video. It's literally the first one on the channel, so published on the 31st of January, almost a month ago. Well, why did they oppose the Nazis? Well, they were under terrible conditions. If you know anything about the workers, at this point, yeah, there were a lot of propaganda, a lot of programs to help them, but in reality, they did not live in amazing conditions like the Nazis suggested. So they weren't happy, so they opposed the regime that obviously made them unhappy. And well, the Nazis, they did not like them, obviously, because they damaged the Nazi economic progress. By sabotaging things and not going to work, they stopped factory production, and they potentially got in the way of the 4-year plan. So, yeah. And also, they were arrested, beaten up, sent to concentration camps. It just not counterproductive, but yeah, to scare them, because if you send more away, you have less workforce, so they work harder, and then you get angrier, so you arrest more. But yeah. Now the church, the Protestant church and the Catholic church. I'm going to make a video sometime soon on the different churches and how they fit into Volksgemeinschaft. But in Protestant church, they did not sign any agreements with the Nazis. They were really peaceful about this. They kept on defending the church teachings. They did not display the swastikas they wanted in the Nazi church. One of the reasons why the Reich Church was created. More information in that coming on soon. They formed the confessional church, and even the members of the church they did civil disobedience. Well, the members, Protestants and Jehovah's Witnesses. So again, members of the Protestant church. Why did they oppose Nazis? Well, they wanted religious freedom. The Nazis were constantly pushing the idea of the Hitler myth and the idea that Hitler was a messiah. They wanted to protect their religion, and they did not, like you said, they did not accept Hitler as Führer. Yes, fine. He was the leader of their country. That much they can accept. What they cannot accept is someone replacing God. No, God is God, not Hitler. Hitler was not sent onto earth by God to save the German people. No. So stop saying that. We're not going to follow that. And that's why they opposed. But how? How did the Nazis oppress them? Because again, they were not that successful. Well, many were executed or sent to concentration camps like Dachau. Their salaries were stopped. In 1937, 700 Protestant pastors in Prussia were arrested and sent to prison. Again, I am going to get more information to you on that. But I was like the 700 PPP, Protestant pastors in Prussia. And they were more individual people they did not go after the Protestant church. They went after individual people. Then the Catholic Church is quite similar. The Pope wrote this useless letter called "With Burning Grief." Well, we haven't told you about this yet, but the Catholic Church signs an agreement with Hitler called the Concordat on the 20th of July of 1933. Again, my birthday. So, signed that agreement saying that if the church didn't oppose the Nazis, the Catholic Church didn't oppose the Nazis wouldn't oppose the Catholic Church. This was Pope Pius XI. Well, the Nazis did oppose the Catholic Church. So Pope Pius was so hurt. He was like, oh my God, with burning grief. He just wrote out this letter saying, oh Hitler, how could you have done this? I can't believe you've done this. So yeah, this is kind of useless. Like, yeah, it's a letter. What are you gonna do against Hitler? Hitler can just break it up. So I don't get that. The messengers went around announcing the letter. Again, what good did they do? They spoke out, they marched. I mean, obviously members of this opposition were Catholics, and notable members were Clemens von Galen. I am going to mention this later on, not in this video, but in another video. But von Galen was actually for the Nazis when they came to power. He was like, yes, finally. But then because of the T4 program, euthanasia, he started opposing the church. Well, I mean, the Catholic Church obviously did not like the Nazis because they had their churches attacked. And the Catholic youth groups, like the Hitler Youth, but basically for Catholics, they were abolished. So, what are you doing? You promised not to do anything under the Concord Act. Now I'm going to write you this letter. Well, what did the Nazis do? They increased repression. They sent 400 priests to Dachau. However, von Galen was not arrested. Because the Pope protected him. That shows how the Nazis couldn't touch too many people. I was going to make a joke right there, but I'm not. And yeah, civil disobedience, they stopped that. So next we have the actual resistance groups. These were societies, like groups from society, but here are actual resistance groups. Well, anyway, first is the White Rose, which yesterday marks a year. Not a year. Oh God. Yesterday marks the anniversary of something relating to the White Rose. I don't remember. I get newsletters saying important events in history on this day, and that came out. Anyway, White Rose. It was a non-violent form of opposition. They spread letters, which were anonymous, and they had six leaflets, and there were even 50,000 copies of those six leaflets. Well, the members were young people. The White Rose was actually, the founder was Sophie Shaw. Like a young girl, not far from my age, maybe even younger, 15, 16, 17, that age. And Hans was her brother. He also helped her. Also, these letters were sent to people at the University of Hamburg and mailed to scholars. So they were trying to get the support of youth associations and young people and young intellectuals. Well, why did they oppose the Nazi regime? Well, they disliked the behavior of German soldiers. It's not like the youth opposed everything. The German soldiers were being brutal, and they opposed it, so. Well, there was a disgust on the Eastern Front, the treatment of the Jews. This was not 1930s, this was rather 1940s. By this point, the treatment of the Jews was not, I'm saying common knowledge, but they got an idea. I don't know if they got the idea of what was actually happening in the execution camps, but they did know they were being transported out to the ghettos and treated horribly. Well, what did the Nazis do? Well, they got arrested, like I said, 1940s, Hans and Sophie Shaw got arrested by the Gestapo in 1943. And if you notice, this is not against the Nazi party, the White Rose, it's against the police and the German soldiers. So, state matters. So, arrested by the Gestapo, not the SD. And they were basically sentenced to death and executed. So that's that. Then, Haro and Libertas. These are kind of cool. I forget the dates, but it's later on. It's 40s, I think. Well, they formed this association called the Red Orchestra. They passed Red Orchestra, Red Communism. They passed information on to Stalin. They collaborated with him, and basically it was aspiring espionage. Members here was everyone was welcome, and they were but only confidential and trustworthy people. Harrow and Libertas, they were a married couple. Harrow, I think it's Harrow, he was in the Luftwaffe. However, he had leftist ideals. So, yeah, he was there, he wasn't kicked out, but he never got promoted. He never got put above his friends and his comrades. No, not comrades. His companions in the Luftwaffe, because he was kind of left-wing. So he associated himself with Stalin, and at first Stalin was like, no thank you, I don't trust you, who are you, and why are you telling me this? It's a trap, obviously, I'm not going to believe you. Well, one day Harrow sent Stalin a letter containing military information. Stalin read it and said, I don't know if it was Stalin, but Stalin's generals saw this and said, yeah, right, this is going to happen. It happened. Harrow sent another letter. It also happened. And then by a third letter or something, Stalin said, okay, fine, we get it. You're a real thing. You're going to work for us. So, these messages were coded, but one of these messages was actually captured and decoded. And because they caught Harrow and Libertas, they knew it was going to Stalin, but they couldn't really do anything about Stalin. So they executed Harrow and Libertas, who were the founding members of the Red Orchestra. Again, this is again, this type of resistance is a bit, it's more nonconformity than actual resistance, but, well, it was the swing, youth, and jazz groups. Well, they listened to Western music, culture, and dance. All under 21, including the Edelweiss Pirates. More informed them later. And they wore outlandish clothing. So, instead of wearing those plain gray and brown clothes young people were expected to wear, they wore yellow, pink, red, blue. No, like dirty, ugly. No. Like actual outlandish and out there clothes. Members were, like I said, young people, and obviously people with enough money to buy these clothes and to be able to afford Western music and associate themselves with people. They did not like the Nazi regime because they did not like authority, and they had no real political goal. They just did not like authority. You could argue that young people never like authority, which is true, but it's not because they did not like, it's not like they would have revolted against the Weimar Germany government people. No, it's just they did not like the Nazi way of authority. They did not like Himmler. They wanted freedom, and they did not like this classical idea that had been pushed on them. The previous generation, their parents and maybe their older brothers and sisters, they had lived through the roaring 20s. They had lived through this golden age in Germany where culture was flourishing, and now they suddenly had to live through this period of going back to traditional values? Oh, hell no. Well, they were never a really big thing. They did not spread through society, and they were arrested. 383 members of these swing youth jazz groups were arrested. Before I get into the Edelweiss Pirates, I'm going to tell you about the resistance from the elites. One of Hitler's economic goals was to get the support of these elites. And these elites, they used not all of them, like Hitler. So They used newspapers, they gathered secretly, they used conspiracies, and because they were elites, they had access to Hitler on a daily basis. These were mainly army members. And they feared they would go into war. And it's not that they disliked an authoritarian style of government, because they liked the Kaiser and they wanted the Kaiser back. It's just they did not like Nazi authoritarianism, Nazi fascism. But there were never enough members for this to become an actual form of, like, a significant form of resistance. So yeah, that's that. They did have access to Hitler. They did not use open methods of resistance. They just tried to push a few things. If Hitler said do this, maybe misinterpret things a bit. Kind of non-conformity again. Non-conformity was the most common type of resistance. And now the final type of resistance, not type of group, the Edelweiss pirates, like I mentioned them earlier. These are rebels in the sense of the words, both because of their age and because of what they did. They ridiculed youth members, like Nazi youth. They went around and in the countryside, and if they saw a group of Nazi youth, Hitler youth, they would just laugh at them, sing parodies of songs, ridicule the uniform. They got more and more violent as the years went on. At the beginning, they were peaceful, not quite so much by the end. They were both youth people. There was the youth, young girls and boys. Everyone was welcome, and they were still in the Rhineland, although they were around the country. And again, like I said, for the swinging jazz groups, they opposed Nazi authority and control. Like, they were executed. So, I think in 1944 they killed the head of the Gestapo in Cologne, and 13 members were arrested and publicly hanged. So that's that. So that's pretty much all the resistance groups there is. Then there's the question of who posed the most important resistance to the Nazi regime. I'd say the Catholic Church, but again I have not really explained the Catholic Church in that much detail because that's coming in another video, like I've mentioned. Then I'd say political parties. I mean, if you ever ask for an essay on this, I'd say the Church. I wouldn't necessarily say the Catholic Church, like the Church. Then political associations, including workers, and then youth groups. Although youth groups were not that effective, in reality there was not that much. There was a lot of opposition. It was just not organized. If they had been more organized, they definitely would have done something. So yeah, that's that. And again, this just shows how powerful Himmler was. Himmler managed to squash all this opposition, which is really crazy. That's a hell of a lot of opposition, and it gets controlled like that. Yeah, they were poorly organized. Oh, I forgot to say, the Edelweiss pirates, they had a reunion, kind of, in 2004, so they survived the war. Some of them were executed, but some of them survived the war. Well, I mean, the Himmler and the police state, they controlled these, they maintained in strict guidelines. And yeah, the main opposition reasons were because they did not like this control and this brutality by these organizations, SS, SD, Gestapo, Nazi courts, concentration camps. But like I said, Himmler crushed all of them. You can't, I've said this in the Speer video, I've said this in the Goebbels video, and if I ever do this for like an actual biography video on Himmler, I'll say this again. You can't deny the genius. You can't deny how effective Himmler was. From a young boy who had been denied service in the First World War because he was too young and turned 18 right after the war had finished, to a young guy holding a flag at the Munich Push, to the head of the SS, the SD, the Gestapo. He was a mastermind. He was really clever, and it's just, how did he get that far? Also, he wore glasses, hypocrite. So I think that's pretty much it. This was not the golden age, the age of Himmler. So yeah, I'll probably do at one point a biography video on Himmler, but this was more on the police state and the resistance against it. So yeah, I hope you liked it, and thank you for watching.